The chandeliers of the Al Fahim Palace ballroom shimmered like captive suns, their light scattering across walls of gold leaf and silk. Hundreds of guests, ministers, businessmen, and foreign dignitaries watched as Sheikh Rashid Al Fahim and Isabel Cruz stood beneath an arch of white roses, their hands clasped in quiet ceremony. The air was heavy with perfume, money, and curiosity. Cameras clicked in rhythm with the orchestra, freezing every second of a wedding worth $2 million. Isabel's smile was flawless, trained, bright, and brittle. The gown Rashid had commissioned from Paris glimmered with thousands of hand-sewn crystals, each reflecting her beauty, like a secret she could not keep. She repeated her vows softly, voice trembling under the weight of eyes that didn't blink. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Rashid leaned close. His kiss lingered too long, possessive, his hand gripping her chin with subtle pressure. The room erupted in applause, but Isabel's heartbeat drowned all out. She smelled the oud in his cologne, felt his breath at her ear as he whispered, "Now you are mine." The celebration unfolded in layers of opulence. Dancers from Morocco swayed between tables, fountains sprayed rose-scented mist, and a string quartet played under a ceiling painted with constellations. Reporters outside the palace gates compared the event to royal weddings. The Sheikh, they said, had finally chosen a queen worthy of his empire. But the bride's eyes betrayed another story. Behind the diamond tiara and perfect poise was a storm Isabel had carried from Manila, one that luxury couldn't quiet. When she glanced at her reflection in the mirrored walls, she saw not a princess, but a survivor dressed in someone else's dream. At the head table, Rashid toasted their union with imported champagne. His voice, deep and commanding, filled the room, to love that knows no borders, to a new beginning. The guests cheered, raising glasses of gold-rimmed crystal. Isabel lifted hers too, though her hand trembled slightly. Enough that Rashid's gaze caught it. His eyes were the color of dark sand, watchful even in joy. Later, as the festivities continued, he guided her through the crowd like a man parading a rare possession. "Smile," he murmured each time her lips faltered. "My friends are watching." She did, because she knew how to. When midnight came, the palace lights dimmed, and Rashid led her out to the terrace overlooking the desert. The dunes shimmered under moonlight, an endless ocean of silence. From below, faint music and laughter drifted up like ghosts of celebration. "It's beautiful," Isabel whispered. "It's yours now," Rashid replied, his tone soft but certain. "Everything you see, the land, the house, the name." She smiled again, this time weaker. "I never imagined a life like this." Rashid studied her face, his expression unreadable. "And what kind of life did you imagine before?" Her throat tightened, one that wasn't borrowed. He chuckled, though the sound was dry. "Then consider this a gift. I give you a new name, a new past." His words should have comforted her, but they landed like a warning. He stepped closer, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I don't tolerate lies, Isabel, not from the woman who bears my name." Something in his tone froze her. The night breeze cooled her skin, but his stare burned through it. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now let's go inside. Tomorrow, the world will wake to headlines about us. I want them to see a perfect marriage." As they walked back into the glittering ballroom, Isabel caught her reflection one last time in the glass doors, her face glowing beneath the tiara, but her eyes hollow, uncertain. The applause resumed, the music rose again, and she smiled on cue, as though perfection were her second skin. Yet somewhere deep within, buried under layers of silk and fear, a thought whispered through her mind. Perfection never lasts in the desert. And as the night faded into dawn, the first cracks in that golden world were already forming, invisible, silent, waiting to break open. Morning sunlight poured through the tall arched windows of the Al Fahim Palace, flooding Isabel's new world in gold. From her balcony, she watched the desert stretch endlessly, dunes rolling like frozen waves. Below, servants in white moved soundlessly through the courtyard, polishing marble floors and watering imported roses that had never known real rain. Every morning began the same way. Silk robe, breakfast served on silver trays, Rashid's note folded neatly beside her tea. "Rest well, my desert flower." The words were gentle, romantic even, but they felt rehearsed, as if affection itself had been measured and scripted. At first, Isabel told herself she was lucky. She had escaped the chaos of Manila, the noise, the debts, the men who had promised her forever and given her nothing. Rashid was stability. He was order. He was safety dressed in Armani and power. But as the days unfolded, she began to realize that safety here came with a price. Every room in the palace glittered with excess, but none of it felt like hers. Cameras watched every corner. The staff bowed too low, their eyes avoiding hers. When she asked questions, "Can I visit the city?" or "Could I call my sister?" the answers came with soft smiles and firmer refusals. "His Excellency prefers his wife stays within the palace grounds," one maid said politely, eyes downcast. By the third week, Isabel could feel the walls breathing. The endless quiet, the perfection, the scent of oud that lingered even in her dreams. It all pressed down like a weight she couldn't name. Rashid, meanwhile, grew more attentive, more intense. He would arrive unannounced during the day, surprising her in the garden or at the piano room. "You play beautifully," he'd say, standing too close. "Who taught you?" "An old lover." Isabel laughed it off at first. "No, just my mother." But he kept asking about her mother, her father, her past jobs, and eventually the men she'd known. His voice always soft, his questions casual. His eyes followed every word like a predator tracking breath. "Were you ever married before?" he asked one evening, as they dined beneath a chandelier heavy with crystals. She froze for half a second before forcing a smile. "No. Why do you ask?" He shrugged. "Curiosity. A woman like you, beautiful, mysterious. Surely you've been loved before." "Everyone has a past, Rashid." "Yes," he replied, his tone almost tender. "But not everyone deserves to keep it." The silence that followed was thick. Isabel looked down at her plate, appetite gone. That night, she lay awake in the massive bed, feeling the space beside her grow colder. She could hear the faint hum of security cameras in the hallway, the soft click of guards' boots outside. Even in the luxury of silk sheets, her body tense like prey waiting for movement. In the mornings, Rashid's affection returned. Flowers, gifts, and long drives through the desert. Yet every compliment was laced with inspection. When he told her she looked beautiful, his hand would linger at her throat. When he praised her grace, his eyes searched her face for cracks. One afternoon, while exploring the west wing of the palace, Isabel discovered a locked room. The keyhole was covered with velvet tape. She tried to ask about it, but the head maid, Fatima, stiffened immediately. "That part of the house is private," she said quickly. "Please, madam, don't go there." Isabel didn't. But that night, she dreamt of the door, of whispers behind it, of shadows pacing inside. Days passed, each one blending into the next like sandstorms blurring the horizon. Rashid became unpredictable. Tender in the morning, cold at night. He spoke of honor, of legacy, of bloodlines. Once, when she tried to suggest hosting her Filipino friends, he said softly, "You belong to my world now. You don't need reminders of the old one." His words wrapped around her like silk, soft, shining, and suffocating. One evening, as the call to prayer echoed across the dunes, Isabel stood by her window, staring at the horizon. For the first time, the desert no longer looked endless. It looked like a cage. And as the wind carried the sound of distant laughter from below, guards, perhaps, or guests, she felt a pulse of unease she couldn't shake. Somewhere far away, her old life was calling back to her, whispering of unfinished stories and buried sins. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would find a way to reach out. Because even paradise, she was beginning to understand, comes with eyes that never blink. The palace phone rang at dawn. It wasn't supposed to. No one called Isabel directly. The sound sliced through the morning stillness, sharp as a blade against silk. She hesitated before answering, glancing toward the door to make sure Rashid hadn't stirred. "Hello." Her voice was barely above a whisper. At first, there was only static. Then came a familiar voice, smooth, mocking, unmistakably from her past. So this is where you've been hiding." Her blood ran cold. "Ray." Surprised? The laugh on the other end was low, taunting. I saw you on the news. The Sheikh's new bride, all diamonds and innocence. You've done well for yourself. She gripped the phone tighter. What do you want? Money, he said simply. You owe me, remember? You left Manila with everything I gave you, and now you're out there pretending you've never been married. Her throat tightened. I don't owe you anything. We're done. Funny, Ray said, his tone darkening. Because last time I checked, the papers still say otherwise. You never filed for annulment. Legally, you're still my wife. The room spun. Isabel leaned against the dresser, heart pounding so loud she feared Rashid might hear from the next room. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? Ray interrupted. Imagine if your Sheikh husband found out. How much would that little secret cost you? Let's start with $50,000. Send it by Friday or I'll make a few calls. The line went dead. For a moment, Isabel stood frozen, the dial tone humming like a heartbeat. Then she slammed the phone down and pressed her palms to her face. The marble floor beneath her felt cold, merciless. The ghost she thought she'd buried had found her again. Later that morning, Rashid found her in the garden, pale and distracted. You look unwell, he said, sitting beside her. Nightmares. She forced a smile. Just tired. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're trembling. He reached for her hand, thumb grazing her wrist as if testing her pulse. Are you hiding something from me? She laughed softly, though her voice cracked. Of course not. He studied her for a moment longer before letting go. You'll tell me if something's wrong, he said. It wasn't a question. I will, she whispered. But that night, when Rashid fell asleep beside her, Isabel slipped out of bed and opened her hidden drawer. Inside, a small envelope marked Manila. She kept it as insurance, photocopies of IDs, marriage certificates under different names. Maria Isabel Cruz, Isabel Ramos, Mariana de la Cruz. Each belonged to a version of herself she tried to erase. Her first husband, Luis Ramos, had been kind, too kind, until the accident. Her second, Ray, charming until the drinking turned violent. The third, a businessman in Cebu, had vanished after discovering she wasn't who she claimed to be. Each marriage ended the same way, with lies, escape, and a trail of pain she told herself she could outrun. Now, in the palace that glittered like heaven, her past was crawling through the cracks. The next few days were unbearable. Isabel checked every call, every glance from Rashid, certain he knew. At dinner, his questions returned, sharper now, almost surgical. Your family hasn't visited. Why? They're busy, she said quickly. And your mother's name? You never mentioned it. She passed, Isabel whispered. When? Her hand tightened around her fork. Years ago. He smiled faintly. You lie too easily, my wife. That worries me. Her pulse stuttered. That night, she tried to call Ray back, but his number was disconnected. Instead, a text appeared. You think one of us is enough to ruin you? Wait till the others remember. Others. Her fingers shook as she read it over and over. The message wasn't signed, but she didn't need to guess. Luis's cousin had once threatened to find her. The Cebu man's business partner had sworn revenge. The past was no longer a ghost. It was multiplying. When she looked up, the mirror across the room caught a reflection. A beautiful stranger in diamonds, eyes wide with fear. Outside, the desert winds howled against the glass, a sound like voices carried from another life. Isabel pressed her palm against the window, as if she could touch the horizon and escape through it. But the sand only swallowed everything it touched. She knew then that the walls around her were closing in, not to protect her, but to keep her in. And somewhere inside the palace, Rashid was already beginning to suspect that his perfect bride wasn't who she claimed to be. The silence between them had grown into something living. Rashid no longer asked about Isabel's sleepless nights or her sudden tears. Instead, he watched, always from a distance, always too quietly. The palace, once filled with laughter and music, now pulsed with an unspoken tension that Isabel could almost taste in the air. It began with a question Rashid didn't ask out loud. A single, unsettling curiosity that had been growing since the day she flinched at a phone call from Manila. That morning, while Isabel was still asleep, Rashid summoned his head of security. "Something doesn't fit," he said, his tone low but sharp. "Check her background again. Every document, every name. Use Malik." The name carried weight. Malik was more than an aide. He was Rashid's shadow, a man whose reputation for discretion and results stretched across continents. Within hours, he had a flight booked to Manila and a mission sealed with silence. In the days that followed, Isabel sensed a shift but couldn't name it. Rashid's affection had not vanished, only changed shape. He smiled more, but his eyes had turned calculating. When he touched her hand, it felt like he was measuring her pulse for truth. He brought her gifts, pearls, perfume, and an antique gold locket engraved with Arabic calligraphy. Inside it was a photograph of them taken on their wedding day. "To remind you that you belong here," he said softly. Isabel smiled, though her chest ached with unease. "I don't need reminders, Rashid." "Everyone does," he replied, pouring wine into her glass. "Even liars." The word landed like a knife. She looked up, startled, but his expression didn't change. He raised his glass to her with a charming grin. "To honesty, my love." Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Malik moved to the back streets of Manila with quiet precision. He found her old address in Quezon City, a crumbling apartment block surrounded by rusted gates and gossiping neighbors. A few questions and a generous bribe later, he had what he came for: copies of marriage records, police reports, and a photograph of Isabel standing beside a man in a cheap suit, smiling like she believed in happy endings. But there were more photographs, more men, more names. When Malik returned to Dubai a week later, he placed a sealed envelope on Rashid's desk. 3 marriages, all legal, none annulled. Her real name varies: Maria Isabel Cruz, Isabel Ramos, Mariana de la Cruz. She's used falsified documents to travel. Rashid's jaw tightened. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally opened the file, his expression didn't show anger, only cold fascination. "Did she love them?" he asked quietly. Malik hesitated. "It doesn't look that way. Each husband lost money, reputation, or both." Rashid leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. "Then she played them. Should I confront her?" Malik asked. "No," Rashid said after a pause. "Let her believe she's safe. A liar reveals more when she thinks the room is empty." He looked out the window, toward the desert, endless, unforgiving, silent. "I will decide how to break her." From that day on, the palace itself seemed to turn against Isabel. The servants spoke less. Her calls were monitored. Even her wardrobe was chosen for her, as if to remind her that every color, every fabric belonged to Rashid. When she walked the hallways, she felt eyes following her, unseen but constant. Sometimes she caught Malik watching from a distance, expression unreadable. He always looked away the moment she met his gaze. One evening, as Rashid joined her for dinner, he said casually, "You once told me your mother died years ago." "Yes," Isabel answered, forcing calm. He cut a piece of steak, slow and deliberate. "Strange. I received an invitation to a church fundraiser in Manila, signed by a woman named Maria Cruz. She claims to be your mother." The knife slipped from her hand. "That's impossible." Rashid smiled faintly, savoring her panic. "Is it?" She stared at him, heart hammering, but his expression was calm, too calm. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and rose from the table. "You look pale, my dear. Perhaps you should rest." As he walked away, Isabel felt her breath catch. The walls of the palace seemed to close in, whispering secrets she could no longer keep buried. From somewhere down the corridor, she heard Malik's quiet footsteps fade into the night. She knew then something had been set in motion, something that could not be undone. The morning began with silence, too perfect, too still. Isabel woke to the faint hum of the palace air system and the soft rustle of curtains drawn by invisible hands. Rashid was gone, as he often was lately, leaving behind only the scent of his cologne and the echo of control. When she stepped out of bed, her bare foot brushed against something on the carpet. A small envelope, cream-colored, unmarked. Her heartbeat stuttered. She knelt, fingers trembling, and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Her breath caught. It was her wedding picture, not from Dubai, but from Manila. The faded image showed her and Ray Santos, standing before a small church, her smile wide and naive. A red circle had been drawn around their hands. The wedding rings, and below it, in block letters, someone had written, "Does he know?" The room tilted. Isabel staggered to the dresser, gripping its edge until her knuckles turned white. Her first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a prank, a cruel joke. But deep down, she knew better. Rashid knew. The proof was no longer hidden in Manila or locked away in her drawer. It had reached her door like a death sentence slid beneath it. She rushed to the balcony, scanning the courtyard. Guards moved in pairs. The maids avoided her eyes. Even the birds seemed to avoid the palace today. She felt the weight of Malik's unseen presence somewhere in those shadows. Watching, waiting. At breakfast, Rashid's tone was different. Precise, stripped of warmth. "You didn't sleep well," he observed. I was just tired." He nodded, cutting his food with surgical calm. "Strange. You seem unsettled." "I'm fine." "Good." His gaze lingered on her face. A wife with nothing to hide should always sleep peacefully. The words sliced clean through her composure. She nearly dropped her glass. Rashid noticed. He said nothing more, only smiled faintly, as though he enjoyed her unraveling. The next days were a quiet torment. The palace no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap disguised in marble. Her phone calls went unanswered. Her messages to her sister never delivered. Every hallway whispered her name in the hush of servants who knew too much. One evening, she found her drawer open, the one where she'd hidden the Manila documents. Nothing was missing, yet the papers had been moved. She sat on the floor, shaking, realizing that whoever had done it wanted her to notice. That night, Rashid kissed her cheek before bed. His touch was gentle, his voice soft. "You know," he murmured, "trust is everything in marriage. Once it's gone, there's nothing left but fear." He turned off the lamp and left her in darkness. Isabel lay awake, every breath shallow. The decision formed in her mind slowly, painfully. She had to leave. Whatever waited outside the palace couldn't be worse than what was coming from within. At dawn, she packed a small bag, passport, cash, the remaining documents. The plan was simple. The palace gates opened for deliveries at noon. She would slip out then, unnoticed, but as she stepped into the corridor, a voice stopped her. "Going somewhere?" Malik emerged from the shadows, dressed in his usual black, his expression unreadable. I was just going for air," she stammered. He stepped closer. "You're a poor liar, Mrs. Al-Fahim." Her pulse thrashed in her throat. "Does he know?" Malik's eyes softened, just slightly. "He already knows," he said quietly. "He's known for weeks." She froze, breath catching. "Then why hasn't he?" "Because he's waiting for you to confess." The words hung between them like smoke. Malik turned away, leaving her standing alone in the endless corridor of mirrors and secrets. Outside, the desert wind howled against the windows, carrying with it the promise of storm. The invitation arrived at sunset, handwritten in Arabic calligraphy on ivory parchment. Dinner at 8. Just us. No explanation, no warmth. Only Rashid's signature at the bottom, bold and deliberate. Isabel stood before the mirror in her dressing room, her reflection pale under the chandelier's glow. She wore the white gown he had chosen weeks ago, untouched until now, silk that shimmered like innocence she no longer possessed. Her hands trembled as she fastened the last clasp of her bracelet. Somewhere inside her, a voice whispered, "This isn't a dinner. It's a reckoning." When she entered the dining hall, the world seemed to narrow to the length of that golden table. The lights were dimmed, candles flickered in crystal holders, and the scent of oud drifted through the air. Rashid sat ahead of the table, dressed in white as well, immaculate, composed, unreadable. "Sit," he said, his tone neither harsh nor kind. She obeyed. The chair felt colder than stone. For several minutes, there was only the soft clink of silverware. the sound of their breathing and the occasional crackle of flame. The silence pressed on her chest until she could barely swallow. Then Rashid spoke. "Tell me," he said, voice smooth as glass, "how many husbands have you had?" Her fork slipped from her fingers. It clattered against the plate, echoing like a verdict. I don't. Do not lie." His eyes met hers, dark, unblinking. "Tell the truth. One last time." Her throat tightened. She tried to form words, but they caught in the air like ash. "3," she whispered finally. "Before you." He leaned back, expression calm. "Their names?" "Ray Santos, Thomas Delacruz, and Omar." "Omar." A faint smile crossed his lips. "The Egyptian? The one who died in the fire?" Her breath caught. How do you—" "Malik is thorough," he interrupted softly. "He traced the ashes, the lies, the money. You've left quite a trail, Isabel." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't what it looks like," she said, her voice cracking. "I was poor. I was desperate. Every marriage was survival, not deceit. I didn't know any other way." Rashid's gaze didn't move. "And me? What am I?" Her lips trembled. "You were different." He laughed quietly, but the sound carried no mirth. "Different." He leaned forward. "You married me for what, Isabel? My name? My wealth? My power?" She shook her head fiercely. "No, I didn't plan this. I swear, I didn't think I could ever love again, not after everything. But then you showed you a better life?" His tone sharpened, slicing through her plea. "And you thought you could bury your past beneath my walls?" Her tears fell freely now. "I was running from the person I used to be. I thought if I could start over." He slammed his palm against the table. The candles flickered violently. "Start over?" he hissed. "You came into my house with false names, false vows, and you call that starting over?" Her voice broke. "I love you, Rashid. I swear I love you. For the first time, it's real." He studied her for a long, unbearable silence. Then he rose, walked to her side, and knelt so their faces were level. The gesture should have been intimate. It wasn't. "You speak of love," he whispered, his voice almost tender. "But love built on lies is rot beneath silk." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Do you know what you've done?" She could barely breathe. "Please forgive me." Rashid's eyes softened, or seemed to. Then his voice turned cold again. "You've dishonored my name. In my world, that means more than betrayal. It means death of trust." She flinched at the word death, though he hadn't threatened her outright. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. "From now on," he said quietly, "you will stay in the East Wing. Alone. You'll have everything you need, except freedom." "Rashid." "Enough." He turned and walked away, his white robes trailing like smoke behind him. The door closed with a soft click that felt final. Isabel sat frozen at the table, staring at the flickering candlelight reflected in the gold plates. Her confession had not saved her. It had only sealed her fate. The last flame wavered and went out, leaving her in darkness. Outside, the desert wind began to rise again, carrying the first whispers of a coming storm, the one that would soon consume them both. The night was too still. Even the desert wind, usually restless against the palace walls, had gone silent, as if holding its breath. In the East Wing, Isabel sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing the white gown from dinner. The silk was wrinkled now, streaked faintly with the shimmer of dried tears. The echo of Rashid's last words, "You will stay in the East Wing, alone," replayed endlessly in her mind. The silence was unbearable. Every tick of the ornate clock sounded like a hammer in her chest. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching down the corridor. Her breath caught. "Rashid?" she whispered into the darkness. No reply. The handle turned. The door creaked open. Rashid stepped in, still in his white robes, though his expression had changed, hollow, dark around the edges. In his hand, a half-empty glass of amber liquid swayed. "You think you can lie to me, then cry your way to forgiveness?" he murmured. His voice was unsteady, soft than before, but threaded with something dangerous. Please, Isabel said, rising slowly. You've had too much to drink. Let's talk tomorrow. Tomorrow? He laughed weakly. You had 3 husbands before me. Did they all get tomorrows too? Her eyes darted to the window. Locked. The balcony. Too high. There was nowhere to run. Rashid, I told you everything. I confessed. He cut her off. You confessed because you were caught. He took a step closer. You think the world won't hear what you are? You think I'll let my name rot under your lies? His words came out in bursts. Pain twisted into fury. He slammed the glass onto the dresser, shattering it into glittering shards. I loved you, he whispered, almost to himself. I was going to forgive you, until I saw the files. You never divorced them. You were still theirs. She froze. What? He reached into his robe and pulled out a folder, crumpled papers inside, legal seals stamped in red, marriage certificates. All valid. You are a fraud, Isabel. Her knees weakened. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Liar. His voice cracked through the air. He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. She gasped, trying to pull away. The perfume bottle toppled from the table and shattered on the floor, flooding the room with the suffocating scent of jasmine. Please, you're hurting me. Rashid's grip tightened. You've already hurt me. Then a flash. The sound of something sharp hitting flesh. A breath. Then another. Then silence. The guard would later say they heard a scream, high and thin, followed by a crash that shook the chandeliers. When the doors burst open, the scene that met them froze every man in place. The white marble floor was slick with blood, deep red, glistening under the chandelier's trembling light. Rashid lay sprawled near the dresser, a knife buried deep in his chest. The handle was gold, one of the palace's ceremonial blades. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Isabel was beside him, her gown soaked scarlet, her hands trembling as she pressed him against his wound. He wouldn't stop, she whispered over and over. He wouldn't stop. Malik, the investigator, pushed through the crowd of guards. He knelt by Rashid's body, his jaw tightening. Get the doctor, he barked. Now! 2 guards ran out, their boots splashing through blood. Madam, what happened? Malik demanded. Isabel's voice came in gasps. He came to me. He was angry. I tried to push him away. Her words trailed into sobs. Malik looked at the knife, then at her hands, trembling, drenched in crimson. Her eyes were wide, glassy with shock. From the courtyard below, the sound of sirens began to wail, distant at first, then closer, echoing off the marble walls. Within the hour, the palace was swarmed by police and medics. Cameras flashed through the gates as journalists gathered outside, shouting headlines before the truth was even known. Sheikh Rashid Al Fahim found stabbed in his palace. Filipina bride at center of shocking murder scandal. Inside, Isabel sat on the cold floor, her wrists cuffed loosely, her face pale beneath the bright lights. She didn't resist when they led her away. Her eyes never left Rashid's still body. As they passed the grand hall, the marble floor gleamed like liquid under the lights. Red, gold, white, the colors of wealth and ruin. Outside, Malik stood watching the ambulance doors close. Something in his gaze was unreadable. He knew Isabel's story wasn't over. Not yet, because in his pocket, he still held a second knife, wiped clean. The palace gates were sealed by dawn. Reporters pressed against the barriers, shouting questions that dissolved into dry morning air. Inside, Dubai police moved with quiet precision, gloves, flashlights, and cameras cutting through the remnants of chaos. The marble floor was scrubbed, but the faint stains of crimson still bled through the polish. Detective Farid Nasser, a man known for his restraint, stood in the center of the grand hall, reviewing his notes. Timeline, he said calmly to his assistant. Screams at 12:47. Guards enter by 12:50. Rashid Al Fahim pronounced dead at 1:12. Isabel Cruz detained on scene. The assistant nodded. The maid confirms hearing them argue earlier. No one else entered the wing. Farid's gaze lifted toward the staircase, where Isabel had been found. No sign of forced entry. No intruders. He closed his notebook. Then the question isn't who, it's why. Upstairs, Isabel sat in a guest room now turned interrogation chamber. Her wrists were free, but her eyes, bloodshot hollow, betrayed a mind unraveling. A soft knock preceded Farid's entrance. He took the chair opposite her, setting down a folder marked with the Sheikh's crest. "Mrs. Al-Fahim," he began gently, "do you understand the charges?" She nodded faintly. "They think I killed him." "Did you?" Her lips trembled. "He wouldn't stop," she whispered. "He was drunk, angry. I tried to push him away. He fell." Farid studied her face. The tremor in her voice was real, but the story, incomplete. "You stabbed him," he said, not as accusation, but fact. Her eyes filled with tears. "He came at me. I thought he'd kill me." Farid didn't respond. He opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. A shot of the golden knife, its handle smeared with blood, fingerprints faint but visible. "Your prints are here," he said. "Only yours." She stared at the image, mute. Farid leaned back. "Tell me about Malik." Her head snapped up. "Malik, he was close to the Sheikh. His name appears in Rashid's call log, minutes before the incident." Farid flipped to another photo, a screenshot from Rashid's phone. Dozens of messages scrolled down the screen. The final one timestamped 11:56 p.m. "Rashid," she confessed. "You were right. Malik." Then it's time she learns her place. "Rashid, she will." Tonight, Farid watched her reaction. The color drained from her face. "He wanted to punish me," she whispered. "He said I'd shamed his name." "Did Malik come to your room?" She shook her head. "No, just Rashid." "Then how do you explain this?" He reached into the file and revealed another photo, a partial shoe print near the window. The size and tread didn't match Rashid's sandals or the guards. Isabel's gaze flickered with something like fear. "I don't know," she whispered. Farid closed the folder. "Mrs. Al-Fahim, the press already has your story. They're calling you the Black Widow of Dubai." Her breath caught. "That's not who I am." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but perception has its own gravity. 3 former husbands, 1 dead sheik. That's what the world sees." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted peace." Farid stood, his tone steady. "Peace doesn't leave blood on marble." He walked to the door, pausing only once. "For what it's worth," he said without turning, "I don't think this story is as simple as it looks. And Malik, he's missing." The words hit her like a chill. "Missing?" Farid nodded once. "His car was found at the docks this morning. Empty, phone destroyed." When the detective left, Isabel sat alone, trembling. Through the narrow window, she could see the desert stretching endlessly beyond the palace, vast, silent, merciless. Downstairs, the police cataloged the last pieces of evidence. Rashid's shattered glass, the perfume bottle, and a torn corner of a letter addressed to Isabel. The signature at the bottom read, only one word, Malik. The truth was no longer about guilt or innocence. It had become something else, a battlefield between what was real and what the world wanted to believe. Outside, the first helicopter arrived to capture the aerial shot of Dubai's newest scandal. The city skyline gleamed under the rising sun, indifferent to the blood that had bought its headlines. The courtroom was carved from marble and silence. Cameras weren't allowed inside, yet every whisper, every twitch of Isabel's trembling hands would later be painted across the world's screens. The state of Dubai versus Isabel Cruz Al-Fahim began under the weight of 100 watching eyes. Outside, crowds gathered with placards, some demanding justice of the sheik, others chanting for mercy. Inside, the air itself seemed heavy, thick with sand and judgment. Isabel sat at the defendant's table, her hair pulled back, her once radiant beauty dim beneath the pale light. Her wrists bore faint bruises, relics of a night that refused to die. Across from her, Prosecutor Nabil Rahman rose, his voice sharp and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, turning to the jury, "the evidence will show that Isabel Cruz is not a victim. She is a predator, a woman who has perfected the art of deceit. 3 marriages before this one, 3 men left ruined, and now a 4th dead. He gestured toward the photograph of Rashid projected behind him. Regal, smiling, forever untouchable. She came to our city with beauty and lies, Nabil continued. And when her last secret was exposed, she chose blood over shame. The courtroom murmured. Cameras clicked in the hallway beyond the closed doors. When he sat, the defense attorney, Layla Hassan, stood. She was younger, quieter, her tone the calm after storm. Your Honor, she said, the prosecution has given you a ghost story, one where women are villains for surviving. My client did not kill for greed. She fought for her life. She turned toward Isabel. On that night, Sheikh Rashid was drunk, enraged, and violent. You'll hear testimony that he planned to punish her. He wasn't just betrayed. He wanted revenge. The prosecutor scoffed. Convenient words for a woman who leaves death behind her. Layla ignored him. We will show you messages between Rashid and his aide Malik, confirming his intent to harm her. At the mention of Malik's name, murmurs rippled again. The judge struck his gavel once. Order. But Malik was not there to testify. He had vanished days before. His car found near the port, his phone destroyed, his passport missing. His absence hovered like smoke over every word spoken in court. The first witnesses took the stand. Rashid's bodyguard, a palace maid, and finally, a reporter from the Manila Post. Each painted a different portrait of Isabel, the charming bride, the secretive woman, the manipulator. Then came the testimony from the Philippines, a live video feed from Ray Santos, Isabel's former husband. She used me, Ray said bitterly from behind the screen. She left when the money ran out. She's always chasing something, wealth, power, whatever she can take. Layla objected. Speculation. The judge nodded. Sustained. But the damage had been done. The jury's eyes had already shifted. Sympathy replaced by doubt. When it was finally Isabel's turn, she walked to the stand slowly, her steps measured, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't come to Dubai to lie, she began. I came to start over. Rashid, he was kind at first. He made me believe I could be someone new. But when he found out about my past, something inside him changed. Her hands clenched on the railing. He said I had dishonored him, that I would pay for it. That night, he came into my room. He was drunk. I tried to calm him, but he grabbed me. I thought he would kill me. The courtroom was still. Even the prosecutor didn't interrupt. Her voice broke. When I reached for the knife, I wasn't thinking. I just wanted him to stop. Tears slid down her cheeks. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to live. The judge leaned forward, expression unreadable. The prosecutor rose for cross-examination. And yet, Mrs. Al-Fahim, your fingerprints are the only ones on the weapon. Not Rashid's. Not Malik's. Just yours. I was the one who picked it up, she whispered, to stop the bleeding. Or to make sure he couldn't breathe again. Gasps filled the room. The judge banged his gavel. Enough. The prosecutor returned to his seat, satisfied. Isabel sat motionless, her confession hanging in the air like a verdict already spoken. As the day ended, the jury was dismissed. Reporters stormed the courtyard, their headlines already written. Desert Bride or Black Widow? Dubai Sheikh's murder, the final betrayal. Inside her cell that night, Isabel replayed every word she'd said, every face that had looked at her like she was already guilty. But somewhere far across the city, a figure stepped off a cargo ship under a false name. Malik. He lit a cigarette, watching the skyline fade behind him. Then he whispered into the night, "Not yet." 6 months had passed since the verdict echoed through the marble courtroom. The world had moved on, or at least it pretended to. The news cycle found new scandals, new tragedies. But inside the gray walls of Dubai's Central Women's Prison, time stood still. In cell 47, Isabel Cruz Al-Fahim sat at a narrow metal table, her posture calm, her eyes heavy but steady. Across from her, a camera lens blinked red. Recording. "Begin when you're ready," said the producer softly, adjusting his microphone. Isabel nodded. Her hair was shorter now, unevenly cut. The white gown of her wedding had been replaced with the pale beige of a prison uniform. Still, Some trace of the woman she once was, the one who had captivated the sheik in the city, lingered in her voice. "I suppose everyone wants a confession," she began, her tone even. "They want me to say I killed him, that I'm sorry, that I did it for money or for love gone wrong." She paused, eyes fixed on something unseen. But the truth isn't as simple as guilt or innocence. The truth is survival. The producer exchanged a glance with the cameraman, but said nothing. Isabel continued. Rashid wasn't a monster, not in the way stories make him. He was proud, powerful. He wanted everything perfect, his home, his image, his wife. I became part of his collection. She smiled faintly, without warmth. He used to say, "Perfection is loyalty." I learned that in his world, loyalty meant obedience. Her gaze shifted toward the barred window. The desert sun slanted across her face, turning her tears into glass. "I came to Dubai to escape my past. I thought if I could marry him, maybe I could become someone new. But I brought my ghost with me, 3 names, 3 mistakes. And he found them one by one." She took a deep breath. That night, I saw it in his eyes, the same look I'd seen before in every man who thought he owned me. Anger, shame, pride. I knew he wouldn't stop. Her voice softened to a near whisper. So, when he came at me, I reached for what was closest. The knife wasn't for revenge. It was for air, for space to breathe. Silence hung for a long moment. The hum of the camera was the only sound. "People think survival is clean," she said finally. "It's not. It's ugly. It costs you everything, even the parts of yourself you swore you'd keep safe." She looked up directly into the lens. "I didn't plan to kill him, but maybe, deep down, I wanted it to end. Him, me, the lies, all of it." The producer hesitated, then asked quietly, "If Malik hadn't disappeared, do you think things would have been different?" A shadow crossed her face. Malik knew everything. He watched. He followed. He fed Rashid's suspicion. Her lips trembled slightly. And when it was done, he vanished like smoke. Maybe he was never meant to testify. Maybe he was meant to disappear. Her hands rested on the table, fingers tracing invisible patterns. "He once told me something. Secrets only matter to the living." I didn't understand it then. Now I do. Another pause. The light dimmed as clouds moved across the high prison window. "I've stopped asking whether I'm guilty," she said at last. "Because guilt doesn't change what happened. He loved control. I loved freedom. In the end, both of us bled for it." Her tone cracked, not with sorrow, but exhaustion. "You can call it murder. I call it survival. Maybe they're the same thing." The producer swallowed hard. "Do you regret anything?" She looked at him, truly looked, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. "Yes," she said, "that I ever believed love could save me." The silence that followed felt final. After a long moment, she leaned closer to the microphone and whispered, "Tell him to stop calling me a black widow. I buried my past. It just wouldn't stay dead." Then she rose slowly, her chains clinking softly, and turned toward the cell door. The guard opened it without a word. The camera remained focused on the empty chair for several seconds, recording nothing but still air and the faint echo of her last breath. Then, a voiceover, the producer, months later, broke the quiet. "Malik al-Rashidi was never found. The case remains open." The screen faded to black. Her final words lingered, written in white across the darkness. "He loved control. I loved freedom. In the end, both of us bled for it.